You had some questions for me regarding the Declaration of Independence, because, 1 week ago
Yes.
was July 4th.
It was July 4th, last Thursday.
Yes.
Well, when I got to studying the Declaration of Independence, because I thought, I'm going to post it on the website, and then I actually read the document.
Yes.
And I don't think I've done that since grade school. Which is pretty obvious whenever I started reading, because I've kind of grown up with this idea that, this is when we became a free nation, we celebrate the fireworks, we became an independent, free nation, free from the British, we're celebrating this idealistic, and when I read the Declaration of Independence, I kind of got the impression that really the opinion on the matter was a little more like this.
We ain't gonna take it. Oh, we're not gonna take it anymore.
You are not too far from wrong. It is kind of interesting that really about all I remember from of the Declaration of Independence from my school age years was reading the preamble, the first part of it.
Right.
When in the course of human events, or in the course of human events.
Yeah, well, that's what we're all to memorize, and then we kind of skim the rest.
Yeah, exactly. And it's. I don't ever remember it being touched upon or anything. I mean, there were probably some bullet points or something that was listed in the history book. But yes, you're absolutely right. And I did the same thing about. I guess if I graduated high school at age 18, then it was probably about. It was not in college. I don't believe it was in college. It might have been while I was in college, and I just read it independently. Maybe 5-6 years later, I was blown away. I was like, these things happen?
Yeah.
George III did what?
Yeah, exactly.
It sure looks like there was some level of. It wasn't just whiny people, we don't want to be taxed. I mean, it wasn't. It was apparently more than that.
Right. Well, and for me, it was more connecting the dots. I don't know why I never connected the dots of, we're celebrating July 4th, 1776, but we were not a free nation on that day. We were declaring our freedom. We were declaring our independence.
We were declaring it, yes. Yeah.
Right, but we were, basically we were saying was, we don't like the taxes. We don't like the fact that, your soldiers can come and quarter in our house. Yep. This is all the reasons why we had the Bill of Rights.
Yes, right, exactly.
And we don't like the things that you were doing. We're not going to take it anymore. You can go suck an egg. And if you want to come do something about it, bring it on.
Yeah.
And they did bring it on, and they were bringing it on already for about a year. But it went on for several more years.
Well, but, there was the battle, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I find it extraordinary also that there were people who were all the evidence was in front of them, and yet they still refused to see how damaging it could be. I guess it was just. I mean, it's just like now. I mean, there are people who can see. Creeping socialism, creeping taxation for what it is, and then there are others who are just don't seem to be bothered by it, so they don't do anything.
Did you see the tweet I sent you? The direct message I sent you a couple of days ago.
Yes, yeah. I don't know the all the details behind it, but it's
I didn't know.
Not something I spent a lot of time researching on, but I did hear something about it. And, I think that's just extraordinary. I mean, because the reason, what we have to be able to do is, what needs to be done, I think, is, or needs to be taught. If this is a show about how to learn about history.
Exactly.
Right. One of the techniques or one of the things that you can do is you have to separate, like what you just did, you have to separate the Declaration of Independence from the Constitution.
Yeah.
And what happens is that you get political leaders who say, I'm all for freedom, that's what it says in the Declaration of Independence. But then they come over here to the Constitution, which was 11 years later, and blow it off.
Right.
Because the Constitution is binding.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
The Declaration of Independence is non-binding.
Right.
So.
Well, that's what the Declaration was. It was a declaration. It wasn't a.
Yeah. It was a letter. It was essentially a letter to George III.
Exactly.
Yeah. So. So what happens is that we have people who I don't want to say that they're not law abiding, but they take that law and they want to either disregard it or ditch it or put other precedent over it.
Right.
And so then then what are we doing? And what happens is when you pass new laws, and don't regard, like you say, the Bill of Rights, what's in the Constitution, what you are bound to do and what you're not bound to do, or prohibited from doing, you end up drafting laws or writing laws and passing laws that inhibit this over here. The Declaration. What's the principles that are outlined in the whole Declaration? You got this all over again. You got George III all over again. So.
Well, let me ask you a couple of quick questions, just kind of timeline things. And again, these are things that I didn't completely understand, so I think maybe if there's other people like me. First of all, July 4th, 1776. What are we actually celebrating on that day? What happened?
Independence from... Our independence, declared independence from Great Britain.
The document was ratified.
It should be called Independence Day.
Okay.
Well, what happened let me see. Where did my book go? Of course, the one I want is
And
not,
I guess the other question I
top.
have, just real quick, when did we actually get our freedom? When did the British finally leave us alone?
Oh, well, that was in 1783.
Okay.
And even then, they didn't leave us alone because remember the War of 1812?
Well, yeah, there was
they came back. They said, big mistake. A big mistake. Let's go back. Let's harass those colonials some more. This is from the Leading Facts. How about that? It's right on top. The Leading Facts of American History by D.H. Montgomery. In fact, this is the same book that I read that passage on 1812 from.
Okay.
This is by Ginn and Company Publishers from 1902. This was one of my grandfather's books. And here he says, D.H. Montgomery says, and this was a school age book. This is a kid's book.
Was it? Okay.
It says, up to 1776, the Americans had been fighting in defense of their rights as British subjects. Washington said, when I first took command of the Continental Army, I abhorred the idea of independence. But in January 1776, the King's proclamation reached Congress. In it, he called for troops to put down the rebellion in America. That was the only answer he gave to their humble petition for justice. So we had been petitioning him for certain rights or certain abilities to do things.
And of course he wasn't listening.
No. And Congress now saw that there was no hope of reconciliation. The very day that proclamation came, a remarkable pamphlet was published in Philadelphia, and this talks about common sense. Okay, in June 1776, Richard Henry Lee of Virginia offered this resolution in Congress: resolved that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states. John Adams of Massachusetts seconded the resolution. A committee of 5, Thomas Jefferson of Virginia, John Adams of Massachusetts, Ben Franklin of Pennsylvania, and Roger Sherman of Connecticut, and Robert R. Livingston of New York, was chosen to draw up a declaration embodying that resolution. Thomas Jefferson did the work. On the 4th of July, 1776, John Hancock, the President of Congress, right, the President of British Congress, right? British-owned Congress, signed the Declaration of American Independence in that bold, decided hand which the King of England could read without spectacles.
Let's make it really clear.
Then the patriots of Philadelphia rang the Liberty Bell in the old State House till it nearly cracked with the joyous peal. In New York City, the people pulled down a gilded lead statue of the King and melted it up into bullets.
Oh, yes, I didn't know that.
Later, the representatives of the colonies added their names to the declaration that completed the work. The 13 British colonies had ceased to exist. In their place stood a new nation, the United States. He's got it written in bold print, in the United States of America, your country and mine.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, the H. Montgomery. It was awesome. Yes. Yeah, and I was astonished to see that there were actually earlier versions of this particular book, so I guess it was a common book used in the schools in that time, but yeah, and so So yeah, if you see something that says that the July 4th is not the date, there's a couple of reasons that's
Right.
cited, because it wasn't like in the movie 1776 where they're all, the bell rings and
Right.
they're all walking up one at a time.
It took
and
like a year and a half to finally sign the whole thing.
it had to be passed around and ratified, like you say, ratified. Some states had a process that they established through their own constitutions, that they, how they wanted to go about doing it, or through their own committees or conventions, and that there were people that wanted to debate about it or deliberate about signing, and so it took a little while, but the war had started, and that leads me. Well, next time around, we will talk about one of the books that I got, which is actually fairly germane to this particular conversation. So.
Oh, cool.
So anyway, yeah. So that's what I was going to say about the dates. There's also. John Adams in some of his writings and his letters, he says something like, "This day, July 2nd, will ring in history. We'll be setting off fireworks and eating ice cream and
why
all
was he
these
saying
things."
that about July 2nd?
Because I think that was when they wrapped up.
Oh, okay.
So they took a break. Everybody took a break. It was late. Took a break on July 3rd. It was a Sunday, I think.
Okay.
And so then July 4th.
That's when they started.
That's when John Hancock signed it and said, "Get this thing out of here."
Yeah, and I love how
overseas.
Is so big. He's just like, we're going to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, all right. Well, we can take a break.
All right.
When we'll be back, we'll talk some more books.